Sam Seder on the Majority Report. On the phone, we have Shunte Sanders Beasley, former vice president of the UAW Local 869, work at the Stellantis Stamping Plant in Warren, Michigan. Shunte, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So, there's 13,000 of the 146,000 UAW workers who are striking today in different areas around the country. Are you one of them?
No, not as of yet. There's always the possibility that our local could be tapped. If we get the phone call, then we join in on the strike.
So give us some of the numbers and what facilities are being struck right now, and do we know how long those are going to be struck? Are we going to see a different set of facilities, on Monday? What's happening?
This is a little different from what has happened in the past. Typically in the past, what they've done is you have your target company and you strike the whole company. Back in 2019, it was GM. So, GM walked out for, I believe it was 51 days. President Fain is taking a different direction where he's calling this a stand-up strike or a target strike. So right now we have 3 assembly plants out. Toledo North Assembly Plant, or you'll hear them refer to it as TNAP. We have our Wentzville plant, which is GM, and then Ford Michigan Assembly, and that's in Dearborn, Michigan. But again, those are all assembly plants.
I see. And what's the idea? What's the idea with why assembly plants? Do you know? Why is that the first targets?
I think different people would have their own reasoning. I feel like with the assembly plant, you're dealing with your final product. That's once it leaves assembly, it's going to the dealerships or to the car lots. So if you stop the assembly plants or the flow out of the assembly plants, you're affecting their bread and butter. There's no product going to the lots. They have to live. The car lots have to live off their inventory that they have now. Some may have, 180 days. Some may have 30 days, but there's nothing leaving. The plants that he did choose are the big money maker plants. Of course, like with Toledo North, I can speak for Stellantis. Our Jeep comes out of Toledo North, and that's a huge seller for us.
I see. That makes sense.
So that's why I feel like he did it. Yeah, that's why I feel like he went after the assembly plant.
And give me a sense of, if you're at one of the facilities that is not striking, what is the sense amongst local 869 workers? Are they itching? Are people itching to get on the line? How is, if you're not one of those people, how are you engaging in stuff? Yeah,
it's safe to say everyone's itching to get on the line. And that's a little weird because who wants to go on strike? But yes, President Fain, the momentum was there. Everyone was engaged and everyone was ready to walk. So even though we didn't get to walk out at midnight, we do support our brothers and sisters that are out on the line. A lot of us will go out to probably Dearborn, Michigan, to the Ford plant and help out. Some of us, I plan on going there, and then I plan on driving to Toledo at some point to go help them unless we're called. So the momentum is still there, because it's a cause that we have to fight for, we need to fight for. And again, like you said, everyone's very excited.
Let's talk a little bit about those things that you are fighting for. Give us a sense of what your working situation has been, and what the union is demanding from these big three.
We're demanding or asking for the things that we gave up back during the recession in 2008, 2009. So pensions. We have what they call the two-tier system. That's a big piece. We want that system gone. In 2007, if you were hired after October 2007, you're considered a two-tier, so you don't have the defined pension. They also, upon retirement at this point, they have no medical, so they're working without a pension and then towards no medical after retirement. We lost COLA, the cost of living allowance. So many things. Our retirees. Oh my God, our retirees haven't had a raise in over 20 years, as far as their cost of living as well. So yeah, we're fighting. We're definitely, we want the care system ended. We want COLA back. We're basically asking raises. But people are hung up on this, the fact that he asked for a 42% wage increase. And yeah, when you look at 42%, someone say, oh my God, that's a huge increase all at once. But you have to take that 42% and you have to spread it over the past 18 years, because we were stagnant where we didn't get a raise from roughly around 2003 or up until 2019, and I think it was a total of $1.60. So some of us hadn't had a raise since 2003. Some would say since '99.
So this is like back
we're
pay, essentially.
In a sense, yes.
And I think people forget this, but and maybe frankly some folks were too young, but in 2008 the car industry in this country was spiraling down a hole, and there was a combination. I mean, the government literally stepped in with GM, but certainly Ford and what was, I don't know if it was called Chrysler at the time.
Nope. It was Seder at the time.
They basically got huge concessions from their workforce. And now here we are 15 years later, and they're making billions upon billions of dollars, but the workers never got recompensated or readjusted after that. It's as if we're living in the wake of a financial crisis that had destroyed the industry, and the fact is we're nowhere near that at all.
Exactly. And it's like the corporations decided to have selective amnesia. I think they act like they forgot about that, because they came to us and they basically came to us with, we need your help in order, to save the corporations. So we gave up, like I said, we gave up quite a bit. We gave up dollar on the hours. We gave money back off our salary in order to help save them, because they were talking about going belly up. So it was in a sense, it was a win-win for everyone. But they did tell us, once we get viable again, we'll return all these things to you. Like in terms of the two-tier wage system, it started out where there was a 25% cap, and that means once they got to, and this was like corporate wide, once you got to the 25% with the second tier, you cap that, and then you start rolling those people over into being a traditional, what's called a traditional worker.
I see.
That never happened. That never happened.
So wait a second. So let me just be clear. They're basically saying we're going to hire a new class of workers, but that class of workers will never be more than 25% of our workforce, because as soon as we 25% of our workforce is at is comprised of tier 2 workers, the first into that 25% will now move into the traditional workers. And so we'll just, you gotta like sort of like some type of seniority program.
Right. So it was done through attrition. So what would happen is once you got to that, as soon as you hit 26%, that 1%, via retirement, deaths, you had to have the actual openings. So if you had 50 openings, you would have those 50 people that would roll over into the to become a traditional worker. So you did have a path to become a traditional worker, but it never happened.
And for the tier 2, like how long? Well, I guess it's not temporal, right? I mean, I guess, and so what percentage of tier 2 workers are working in the industry now?
Wow. With Stellantis, it's a huge number. I'm not going to say that they outnumber the traditional worker as of yet, but it's getting there.
Wow.
Because you have to look at it in a sense that in under 10 years, most of your traditional workers can retire. Because again, the 2-tier system started in 2007. So you really start seeing them come in around 2010. So like I said, in less than 10 years, most of your traditional workers would have already retired or can retire. So you'll just have all the tier 2 people left, along with the little sprinkles of traditionals that are still there. The problem that we're facing now is our temporary worker situation, and they're called different things, and depending on which company you're talking about. With Stellantis, they're called SEs, a supplemental worker. The path to becoming full-time is ridiculous. I know some supplemental workers that have been there for about 7 years. They've been temporary workers for 7 years. I'm sure there are some out there that have been temporary workers longer than that. So that's a big piece of the negotiations too. They need to have a path to full time. I mean, whatever happened to the 90 days and you get rolled over.
Let me ask you this.
That's not
the reason why, in my estimation, and I think the car industry, for whatever reason, well, I think it's because of the UAW, because they're afraid of worker solidarity and the workers, and they're afraid of workers, of worker power. I've cited this book Wrecked to the point where it's comedic on this show, about how the just-in-time supply lines were changed so as to diminish worker power. But one of the things that often management will do is they'll create multiple tiers so that the traditional workers, that as they're called, aren't necessarily, when it comes time for contract negotiations, it creates, by creating 2 tiers of workers, and it sounds like there may even be more when you include those supplemental workers, those temporary ones. By creating these multiple tier of workers, it diminishes the solidarity of the workers, where people are like, well, I'm okay on this, and so why are we wasting our bargaining strength on that? Tell me what's going on with that, because that to me seems to be like, and I think Fain has addressed this a little bit, but like, how much of that dynamic is at play, or are we just seeing a solidarity that? Talk to me about the solidarity in regards to that, and maybe as you've seen it for however many years you've been working in this industry?
That dynamic is definitely is there. So let me ask you this: how would you feel? You come in and you make $15 an hour, and they place you right next to someone making $31 an hour, and you guys are doing the same job.
Yeah,
That's a horrible feeling on both sides. I know I felt bad, because again, here's someone that's making half of what I'm making, but you expect them to work just as hard as I'm working, and it can sometimes create a hostile work environment. The way we were able to work around that over the years, and it's still there. That's a daily thing we deal with, but in terms of solidarity, the way we were able to get to where we are now was through education. They reach one, teach one, and you just have to, as soon as they come in the door, it's like the big brother, big sister thing. You start pulling them to the side, and you start talking to them, and you start educating them on, exactly what the union is and what the union can do for you. And we're in this fight together. I know, there are differences with us now, but if we stick together and we fight together, we win together. And that's where we are now with President Thane. He's taken the union, the UAW, in a different direction. It's a more progressive direction. And we're not just fighting for members of the UAW. We're fighting for the entire American workforce. Because again, if we win, everyone wins. In the past, when the UAW bargained, their contracts kind of set the tone for what would happen with workers, not just in America, but around the world. So they sit back and they watch our contracts unfold. I'm sure you remember when we rolled out the two-tier system. As soon as we did it, everyone started doing it. Right. And, the old saying is, once you let something out, get something out there, it's hard to reel it back in sometimes. So that's been the fight, trying to get rid of it. And it needs to go because, like you said, it creates division, and management does use it as a tool to pit us against each other. So at contract time, you pit us against each other. Prime example was the 2015 and 19 contract, where the traditional workers had to sit back and watch the in progression workers get all the raises. But it was in an effort to at least try to get them up to where we were. But you couldn't move them and move us too, because you were kind of defeating the purpose. Right. But because of the way that a lot of us had been brought up, we understood. And we didn't turn around and lash out at them and take it out on them. We understood the process. And now we're at a point in time where, for the most part, they've all peaked to where we are. So in the last contract, they were able to bridge a lot of that gap and bring them up to where we are. If there's any difference, it's minimal. But what Sean wants to do is it's equal pay for equal work, straight across the board. So we want the tier systems gone. We want to get rid of the tier systems. They want to add more layers. And it does hurt at contract time because, like you said, they'll dangle a certain carrot. If you read some of the, if you've seen some of the proposals that have been tossed out, you'll see where the verbiage will say for certain people, or, most of the membership, some of the membership. It won't cover the whole membership. And that's what he wants to do away with. You're going to address my whole membership. That's why I really like the way he went about these negotiations, where he brought all three companies to the table. So one company doesn't have the opportunity to sit back and say, oh, okay, I can go in and tweak that, or I can tear that down. They're all sitting there together.
Yeah,
and I love that.
How long have you been a member?
25 years, but that's just me physically working. I've actually, I've been a UAW member since as far back as I can remember, because I walked my first picket line with my mom when I was 5 years old.
Wow.
So I've been doing this a long time.
Well, so give me a sense. I mean, with that said, give me a sense of like, how does this feel different than in any strike or any type of like negotiations, or just even in the absence of the actual actions? Like, is there feel like there is a difference amongst the membership?
Oh, there's a huge difference. Up until President Fain, there always seemed to be a disconnect with the IEB or International Executive Board, or even the reps in international and the local level. So, most people, if you ask someone who's just coming into the union and you ask them, their mindset is going to be like parent-child. International reps or international is the parent, local level is the child. So we need help, we call mom or dad. But there was a disconnect there. And we didn't get a lot of information. The communication wasn't there. Sean is doing something totally different. He is being totally transparent, and he is sharing information, and that is something we've never had. So we were never kept like the updates and things like that. We never really got that. It was, they would go to the table, they would sit down, and then they would bring us a tentative agreement. They would give us the highlights of the tentative agreement. Growing up with my mom, who consulted with the UAW, the one thing I remember her always saying is, when they bring you the good, ask them to show you the bad. So they never did that. So, they just brought us the good stuff, and they came with, this is the best we could do. I've yet to hear him say that. Actually, he hasn't even brought us a tentative, because if it's not looking good, I'm sure you've seen, he tosses it in the trash can.
Yep.
And, let's start over. So President Fain has shown up, and he's shown the membership that he's willing to fight, and that he's willing to fall on the sword for us. We've never had that in the past. I mean, unless you want to go back to Walter Reuther. We've not had that. We've not had the leadership that actually seemed like they really, really care for the membership. He has the membership's best interest at heart. I know Sean from Kokomo, but Sean was in Kokomo, and I worked at the Indianapolis Foundry. So I know the fight. I remember the fight that he had when he was just a committeeman back in Kokomo. And I'm 50 miles away, and we would hear about him because he was always a stand-up guy. So he makes it easy for you to want to support him. He makes himself available. He's tangible and touchable. I mean, past presidents, if you ask people, you'll never hear people say that they got to meet the international UAW president. He's a people's person, and he has no problem being out, and he'll take time out to talk to his membership. He's accessible, and that's something that the starvation was there, and now it's more of a thing that he's feeding his membership, and his membership is flocking to him, and they believe in him, and they believe he can get the things done that he says he's going to get done. They don't feel like they're being lied to. They don't feel like that their leadership is stealing from them or taking advantage of them. He's turned the ship around, and it's floating in a different direction, and they're very happy with the direction that it's going in.
Well, it all sounds really inspiring, and how can people who are not members of the UAW, how can we help?
Community is a big thing in the midst of a strike. the first thing, I'm big on education, especially when it comes to the union. I'm huge on education, and the first thing I would say is, if you're not in the union or a non-union member, join the union. That's the first thing I'm going to tell you. Educate yourself, because we're not bad people. You know, some of our biggest fights right now are with non-union members, because you guys are being greedy. You guys are being that, and it's not greed. Until you've worked in manufacturing, until you've had to sling steel all day long, you won't understand the toll that it takes on your body. I feel like, you know, I hear people say, well, you know, you guys talk about raising the cost, raising the wages, you know, back during the fight for 15, and someone who works at McDonald's shouldn't make $15 or $20 an hour. Why not? Because they have to pay the same bills that you have to pay. So everyone needs a decent wage. So we try to pour into the community as best we can, because we all know there's going to be a time that we're going to need them, and right now we need the community. Right, for the plants that are on strike, if they are in your area, you know, bottled water, locals have food pantries, so you can drop canned goods off, dry goods, and different things like that, because you never know which member in the plant, even before the strike, may have been facing some type of financial struggle, and they're living paycheck to paycheck. So while they're on strike, they're only getting $500 a week. So we encourage the community to come out and help. Come out and walk the picket line. You know, you can do that. It's an experience that you will never forget. I plan on actually going and getting my grandson out of Indianapolis and doing the same thing for him that my mom did for me. So that just physically being there really helps. And, you know, people will say, oh, the action happens on days. And it does. But the picket line goes on 24/7. While the strike is going on, because, for instance, if they pull my plant out tomorrow, I work midnight. So on my assigned day, I'll walk the picket line during my regular work hours, which is 12 a.m. I want to do 6 hours, 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. Those are the hardest shifts to pull, because it's dark out, you know, it's slow. That's when we need that encouragement. When you ride past the picket line and you see picketers, blow your horn, you know, yell out. We need that encouragement. We need to know that the community is behind us. And in turn, we're always behind the community when they need things. But educate yourself. That's huge.
Shunte Sanders Beasley, former vice president of UAW Local 869, a worker at the Stellantis Stamping Plant in Warren, Michigan. Thanks so much for your time today. Good luck with.
Thank you.
With the ongoing sanding strike. Good luck with the negotiations, and we hope to check in with you soon. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me.